There is a kind of wealth that does not announce itself. Walk through certain neighborhoods in Kyoto or through the older residential districts of Tokyo near Yanaka or Nezu, and you will pass homes that have stood for 3 and 4 generations. The gardens are carefully maintained, but not extravagant. The cars parked outside, when there are cars at all, are practical, clean, and unremarkable. The clothing worn by the people inside is well made, but carries no visible logos. Nothing about the exterior signals what the interior holds. And yet, the families living in those homes have accumulated more genuine, durable wealth than most American households will see across 2 full generations of working. The interesting question is not how they got it. The interesting question is what they refuse to spend it on. Because here is where most Western financial education fails completely. It is almost entirely focused on acquisition. Earn more, invest more, compound more. Those things matter, certainly. But they address only one side of the equation while leaving the other side, the side that quietly destroys everything built on the first, completely unexamined. The Japanese millionaire does not think primarily about what to accumulate. He thinks first and always about what not to consume. The discipline of refusal. The practice of intentional absence. The understanding that wealth is not built only by what flows in, but by what you choose, deliberately and repeatedly, not to let flow out. This distinction sounds simple. It is not. It runs against nearly everything the Western economy has spent the last 80 years conditioning you to believe about what prosperity looks like, what success feels like, and what a man of substance is supposed to show the world. If you have ever felt that something essential is missing from the financial advice you have received, not a strategy, not a product, but a philosophy, what you were sensing was real. You were standing at the edge of something much older and much more durable than any investment book published in the last half-century. What follows is not a list of tips. It is a transmission of a code. And like all codes worth understanding, it does not begin in the present. It begins in the past, in a specific time and place, among people who understood something about money that most of the Western world is still trying to figure out. To understand why Japanese millionaires consistently refuse to spend money on certain things, things that Western families find nearly impossible to resist, you must go back to Osaka in the early 17th century, specifically to the merchant class known as the chonin, the townspeople, the commercial class that built their fortunes not through land or military power, but through trade, patience, and an internal discipline that was, in many ways, more rigorous than anything the samurai code demanded. The Edo period in Japan began in 1603 and lasted until 1868. It was, from an economic standpoint, one of the most unusual eras in recorded history. Japan was almost entirely closed to the outside world for the majority of this period. No significant foreign trade, no outside financial influence, no imported speculation from Amsterdam or London, no credit expansion modeled after European banking systems, no colonial extraction to create artificial surplus. If you wanted to build wealth in Edo period Japan, you had to do something that most economies throughout history have never been forced to do. You had to create genuine surplus from discipline alone within a closed system with no external windfalls available. This constraint produced something remarkable. It produced a merchant class that thought about money in a fundamentally different way than their counterparts in Europe. The Mitsui family understood this before almost anyone else. Mitsui Takatoshi was born in 1622 in Matsusaka, a town in what is now Mie Prefecture. His family were sake brewers and small traders. He moved first to Kyoto and later to Edo, what we now call Tokyo, and over the course of his lifetime built what would eventually become one of the most powerful and enduring commercial enterprises in Japanese history. The Mitsui name would eventually attach itself to a banking dynasty, a retail empire, and a trading conglomerate that operated for centuries after his death. But what made Takatoshi genuinely remarkable was not his ambition or his commercial instinct. It was his internal financial philosophy, which he codified near the end of his life in a document called the Sochiku Isho. His final written instructions to his descendants. This document was not a business plan. It was not a set of investment strategies. It was, in essence, a code of refusal, a detailed accounting of what the family must never spend money on and why. Takatoshi identified specific categories of expenditure that he believed were not merely wasteful, but actively corrosive, spending that eroded not just accumulated capital, but the mental clarity and relational trust required to manage capital wisely across generations. He placed status spending at the very top of this list, expenditures designed primarily to impress people outside the family, purchases whose main function was to signal rather than to serve. He called this category muda no zeihin, wasteful luxury, and he wrote with the precision of an engineer, not a moralist, that any family that allowed muda no zeihin to take root in its spending habits would lose its accumulated wealth within 2 generations, regardless of how much it continued to earn, not because the spending was immoral, because it was mechanically destructive. It created a consumption floor that rose faster than income could sustain, and it trained the next generation to associate spending with identity rather than function. The Sumitomo family, who built their fortune during roughly the same period through copper mining and trading in the Osaka region, held a nearly identical principle. Their foundational business document, the Monjuin Shigaki, written around 1650, contains a line that translates approximately as, "Do not pursue profit that flows from the appearance of wealth. Pursue only profit that flows from the genuine production of value." For the Sumitomo, the distinction between the appearance of wealth and the reality of wealth was not a philosophical position. It was an operational one. Families that confused the two did not survive. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the Dutch merchant class was doing something structurally opposite. While the merchants of Edo were refining internal codes of restraint within a closed system, Amsterdam was experiencing one of the first great speculative manias in Western financial history. Tulip contracts were trading at prices that bore no relationship to any underlying value. Canal company shares were inflating beyond any rational basis. The culture of credit, spending tomorrow's money today, was beginning to take root in ways that would define Western financial behavior for centuries to come. The contrast is not incidental. It reveals something deep and structural about how each civilization decided to relate to surplus, to future wealth, and to the social meaning of spending. The samurai class reinforced this merchant discipline from a different direction. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, samurai were legally prohibited from engaging in commercial activity. But the ethical architecture of Bushido, the way of the warrior, permeated the entire social fabric. And one of Bushido's least discussed but most financially consequential principles is the concept of Shitsujitsu Guken, written in Japanese as Jishi Gangjan. The phrase means approximately simplicity of outer form combined with strength of inner character. The foundational idea is that external plainness and internal fortitude are not in tension with each other. They are the same quality expressed simultaneously in 2 different directions. A samurai who displayed unnecessary luxury was not, within this code, simply being extravagant. He was revealing a weakness of character. A man who required external objects to feel powerful was, by definition, a man who had not yet developed real power. The expensive display was not evidence of strength. It was evidence of its absence. This philosophy did not remain contained within the warrior class. Over generations, filtered through the social hierarchy of Edo society, it shaped how the merchant class thought about money, how they raised their children in relation to spending, and, critically, what they considered embarrassing to purchase. And that brings us to the code itself. The philosophical principle at the center of Japanese millionaire financial behavior is called kanso. It is one of the 7 foundational principles of Japanese Zen aesthetics, and within the broader framework of wabi-sabi, it occupies a specific and precise position. Kanso means simplicity and the elimination of clutter. But in its financial application, it carries a more exacting meaning, the deliberate removal of all spending that does not serve a clear function or deepen a genuine human relationship. Notice what is absent from that definition. There is no suffering in it, no deprivation, no suggestion that the goal is to live with less for the sake of living with less. Kanso is not austerity as punishment, it is clarity as strategy. The Japanese millionaire, and I am speaking here of the established, multi-generational wealthy families, not the ostentatious newly rich, does not avoid certain categories of spending because he fears poverty. He avoids them because he possesses a finely calibrated understanding of which expenditures produce genuine, lasting satisfaction, and which produce only the momentary sensation of satisfaction followed by a return to baseline, or worse, a new and elevated baseline that now requires more spending simply to maintain. Western psychology has a name for this mechanism, the hedonic treadmill. You make a purchase, you feel the elevation, you return to where you were, and now that level is the new normal. So you need another purchase to feel the elevation again. And the floor rises continuously while the ceiling rises even faster. And the gap that was supposed to close with each acquisition, never closes at all. The merchant families of Osaka observed this mechanism operationally, without academic terminology, 3 centuries before Western psychologists named and documented it. They saw it destroy families. They wrote warnings against it into their foundational documents, and they built social structures that made indulgence in it not just financially costly, but socially costly as well. Here, then, are the 10 things that Japanese millionaire families consistently refuse to spend money on. The 10 categories where Kanso has been applied most deliberately and most persistently across generations. The first is status transportation, the vehicle purchased not for reliability or function, but for the impression it creates in the driveway or the parking lot. The price difference between a dependable car and an impressive one invested over 20 years represents an amount most people would find genuinely shocking to calculate. The second is brand name clothing purchased for recognition rather than quality. The Japanese distinction here is careful and important. Quality is not only acceptable, it is valued. A well-made garment that will last 15 years is a sound investment. But paying for the right to display another company's name on your body, paying for a logo, is understood within these families as a form of psychological dependency. You are renting someone else's identity because you are uncertain of your own. The third is frequent restaurant meals used as social performance. Eating well and eating together are both valued deeply in Japanese culture. But spending expensively in restaurants primarily to be seen spending expensively, or to feel in the moment like someone who does such things, is recognized as a form of insecurity made visible and paid for by the weak. The fourth is home size beyond genuine functional need. The Japanese concept of MA, intentional negative space, meaningful emptiness, applies directly here. A home larger than your actual life requires does not expand your life. It expands your maintenance burden, your heating costs, your cleaning obligations, and the amount of furniture you feel compelled to buy to fill rooms that exist primarily to exist. The fifth is subscription accumulation. The quiet, consistent hemorrhage of monthly charges for services used rarely or never. This one may surprise you given its modern context, but the underlying principle is perfectly captured by Mitsui's concept of muda no zeihin. A recurring expense that produces no recurring value is not a small leak. Over a decade, it is a significant one. The sixth is financial products sold through complexity and fear. Insurance policies stacked upon insurance policies, investment instruments wrapped in layers of terminology designed to obscure their actual cost structures. The established Japanese millionaire families maintained a simple internal rule. If you cannot explain the complete fee structure of a financial product in one clear sentence, you do not purchase that product. The seventh is renovation for hypothetical resale impression. Updating a home not because it requires repair or because it serves the people living in it, but because it needs to look a certain way to an imaginary future buyer. Spending real present money on a speculative and entirely hypothetical transaction. The eighth is entertainment purchased as identity rather than as genuine restoration. This is a careful distinction. Rest, beauty, music, nature, these restore a person. But the compulsive accumulation of streaming services, sports packages, and scheduled experiences bought to fill time rather than to genuinely renew the spirit is a different category entirely. One serves you. The other simply occupies you while charging for the privilege. The ninth is gift escalation driven by social competition. The arms race of giving increasingly expensive gifts, not to honor a relationship, but to communicate financial standing within a group. In Japan, the art and ritual of gift-giving, expressed through omiyage, the gifts brought from travels, and through the formal seasonal traditions of ochugen and osebo, has always been about precision, thoughtfulness, and genuine meaning. Never about price as a substitute for those things. The 10th, and perhaps the most consequential of all, is the ongoing purchase of convenience that gradually eliminates the small competencies that keep a person genuinely capable and self-sufficient. The Japanese hold a proverb, Nana korabi yaoki, chi juanbi ba chiki, fall 7 times, rise 8. The philosophy embedded in that phrase is that difficulty builds the capacity to handle difficulty. A person who pays to eliminate every friction from their daily life does not become more powerful. They become progressively less able to function without purchased assistance, and that dependency is, in the long run, one of the most expensive things a person can develop. Now, we must ask the honest question. If this code is real, if it has produced durable multi-generational wealth for Japanese families over 4 centuries, why did the Western world not absorb it? The answer is not a moral judgment. It is structural, and it deserves to be understood clearly. The American economy, as it developed through the 20th century, was built on a specific and powerful engine: consumer spending as the primary driver of economic growth. After the Second World War, American industrial capacity was the largest the world had ever seen. The critical economic challenge was not production. The factories could produce abundantly. The challenge was absorption. How do you sell everything the factories are capable of making to a population whose natural needs are already met? The answer was the systematic creation of felt need. Advertising was the first mechanism, and it was extraordinarily effective. But the more durable and powerful mechanism was the democratization of credit. When a person gains access to money they have not yet earned, their entire psychological relationship to spending changes. The friction between earning and spending, the natural pause, the moment of consideration, the calculation of whether this purchase is genuinely worth the hours of work it represents, that friction disappears. And with it disappears the internal architecture that makes financial discipline possible. In Japan, the cultural and historical absence of widespread consumer credit through most of the Edo and Meiji periods meant that this connection between labor, accumulation, and expenditure remained intact. You spent what you had accumulated. You built from what you had saved. The delay between earning and spending was not an obstacle to be engineered around. It was the discipline that made durable wealth possible. There is also a social mechanism that ran parallel to the economic one. The Japanese concept of haji, chi, shame, or more precisely, the acute social awareness of being perceived as a person who lacks self-control, functioned for centuries as an internal financial regulator within Japanese communities. A merchant family in Osaka that displayed muda no zaihin did not merely lose money. They lost standing within a social network where standing was both their reputation and their credit. The social architecture enforced financial restraint in ways that no regulation could replicate. American culture developed a nearly opposite social mechanism, displaying spending, the vacation photograph, the new vehicle, the expanded home, the restaurant reservation at a notable establishment, became a form of social capital rather than social liability. The very behavior that Japanese merchant culture treated as evidence of inner weakness, American consumer culture reframed as evidence of success and arrival. The architecture was constructed around you before you had any say in its design. Recognizing it now, clearly and without self-condemnation, is the beginning of something genuinely useful. The application does not require dismantling your life. It requires beginning one practice, sustaining it honestly, and letting the understanding deepen from there. Begin with the kakebo, pronounced kakebo. It is a household financial ledger with roots in Meiji-era Japan, and it is not a budget in the Western sense of that word. A budget is a plan for spending. A kakebo is a practice of witnessing your spending as it actually occurs. Each week, you record what came in and what went out, not in categories designed to optimize, simply in honest record. And at the end of each month, you ask 4 questions, not 10. 4. How much did I earn? How much did I spend? How much did I save? And where could I have done better? And what specifically would I do differently? That 4th question is asked not with guilt, which is paralyzing, but with the neutral, curious attention of a craftsman examining his own work. Observation, not condemnation. The second practice is to select one category from the 10 you heard earlier, just one, and apply to it the principle of Ma. Intentional empty space. For 30 days, you spend nothing in that category, not as punishment, as an experiment, to discover your actual relationship to that spending, whether it was genuinely serving you, or whether you had gradually become a person who served it. The third practice is what I would call the Mitsui question, drawn directly from Takatoshi's documented method. Before any non-essential purchase, pause and ask, does this serve a function in my actual life, or does it serve an image I am trying to project? If it serves an image, ask whose image, and why that image requires this particular purchase, right now, at this price. You do not need to ask this question loudly or dramatically. You only need to ask it honestly. The pause itself is the practice. The pause is where the discipline lives. There is a man I return to often when I think about this subject. He was not famous. He worked for 40 years in an administrative role at a manufacturing company in Nagoya. His salary was modest throughout his career, never exceptional. He retired at 63, and the net worth he had accumulated in savings, in a small property, in careful long-term investments, placed him, by any honest measure, among the financially comfortable. His colleagues, who had earned comparable salaries across comparable careers, retired with almost nothing. When asked near the end of his life what he had done differently, he gave an answer his interviewer nearly missed in the translation. He said simply, "I never bought the feeling. I only bought the thing." That one sentence contains the complete financial philosophy we have explored together today. The feeling of status, the feeling of keeping pace with others, the feeling of deserving comfort now rather than security later. He had understood, early and clearly, that the modern marketplace was not fundamentally in the business of selling objects. It was in the business of selling emotional states attached to objects, and he had decided, without drama and without announcement, that he would not pay for emotional states he was capable of generating from within himself. If you are here, watching this, you already suspected something like this was true. You have felt the quiet, persistent unease of a culture that measures a man's worth by the brand visible on his wrist or the monthly payment attached to what sits in his garage. You have wondered, more than once, whether there was another way, older, more dignified, more aligned with what you actually believe about patience and discipline and the slow, deliberate construction of something real. There was. There is. And it has been practiced continuously within specific families across specific generations. In Japan, for more than 400 years. You did not find this by accident. The kind of man who seeks this out is already thinking in the right direction. He simply needed to know that the direction he was already moving in had a name, a history, and 4 centuries of evidence behind it. In the next teaching, we will enter one of the most misunderstood territories in Japanese financial culture, the practice of kanjo, careful emotional accounting, applied not to purchases, but to the people with whom you make financial decisions. Who you spend money alongside matters as much as what you spend it on. The Osaka merchant families had a precise and rarely documented protocol for this, and when you understand it, it will change how you think about every financial relationship in your life. For now, sit with what you have heard. There is no urgency here. The code is patient. It was built to last centuries. It can wait one more evening while you consider it quietly.